The sky outside Aisha Hayes' small apartment window blended with the cement-gray buildings of Atlanta. Clouds loomed heavy and rain trickled steadily down the glass, quiet, cold, and unrelenting, just like her thoughts. Her hands gripped a chipped mug of black coffee as she watched the blurred city beyond, numbness wrapping tighter around her chest than the oversized hoodie she wore. Her life had spiraled into something she didn't recognize, and at just 23, she already felt like she was drowning in a storm with no shoreline in sight. Aisha, a frail voice called out from behind the thin bedroom wall, her mother. Aisha closed her eyes, the burden on her chest grew heavier. "I'm coming, Mom," she called back softly, hiding the tremble in her voice. She pushed away from the window and stepped into her mother's room, a space that once belonged to a vibrant woman named Lena Hayes. Now it was ruled instead by silence and illness. The room smelled like medicine and the sad staleness of sickness. Lena lay tucked under a faded quilt. Her skin was pale, thinner than Aisha remembered, and her eyes trapped somewhere between pain and resignation. Aisha smiled despite the knot in her throat. "Here, I made some tea, not fancy, but it has honey and ginger, the usual." Lena tried to smile, but it twisted into more of a wince. "You're too good to me." "Stop it," Aisha answered gently, placing the tea on the cheaply made side table. "You know I'd do anything for you." A long pause fell before Lena asked, almost dreading the answer, "Where's your father?" "Out," Aisha replied without looking directly at her. "He went to talk to those people." Lena squeezed her eyes shut. "No, no, no, Aisha, I told him not to go to them, I told him." Her voice shook, cracking under the weight of fear. "God, how did we get to this? Loan sharks, Aisha." And just then, as if summoned by the mention of them, the apartment door slammed open. Aisha's heart nearly stopped as her father stumbled inside. Marcus Hayes, once a proud, steady man with rough hands and soft eyes, now looked like the shell of someone defeated. His face was ashen, lips trembling. He made it to the edge of their worn sofa before collapsing into it. Aisha rushed over. "Dad, what happened?" Marcus covered his face with his hands. The silence lasted long enough for the old kitchen clocks ticking to sound like a warning drum. "They gave us a week," he said finally, voice hollow. 1 week. Lena coughed behind them, a painful whimper more than a cough, frozen in fear. Aisha whispered, "What happens after the week?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He stared blankly at the ground. "We lose everything, Aisha, the apartment, gone, but worse, they said if we don't pay." He raised his eyes. "Your mother won't live to see the end of the month." Aisha staggered back, every organ in her body turning to stone. "But there's one option," Marcus continued, his voice low like he hated himself as he said it. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. "They have a wealthy man, their boss, saw you once, they said, back when he came by to collect." "No," Aisha said instinctively, though she didn't even know the offer yet. "He's offering to erase the debt, all of it," Marcus continued, tears in his eyes now. "He said he'd cover your mother's treatment too, abroad if needed, full hospital care, but the price." "What price?" Her words were knives. "He wants to marry you." Silence. Flat, suffocating silence. Aisha thought her ears were lying, that maybe she was hallucinating. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I would never," but he said, "If we don't, they'll hurt your mother." Aisha backed away, bile rising in her throat. "He wants a bride. What is he? Some kind of psychopath looking for what? A slave, a plaything." "He's rich," Marcus answered quietly. "Elias Thorne, 60 years old, had a stroke, can barely walk, but he's powerful, still controls a lot through his businesses. Alone, no kids, no family, just money." "She's not for sale," Lena cried suddenly from her bed. "I will die before my daughter is sold." Aisha dropped to her knees beside her mother, squeezing her hand tight, but even in that moment, she wasn't sure what she was trying to hold on to. Inside her, a storm brewed: chaos, disgust, rage, and strange resolve. How do you answer a loaded gun of a proposal like that? How do you make a choice when it's between your body and your mother's life? Aisha couldn't sleep that night. She lay stiff under her thin blanket, her eyes open to the ceiling fan above, its slow rotation a cruel reminder of how time kept moving whether she wanted it to or not. By dawn, she had made her decision. She needed to see him. If her parents' lives truly depended on marrying this man, she at least had the right to look him in the eye before selling off her future. That morning, a knock on the door jolted her. A tall man in a sleek gray suit stood outside, crisp and polished, like he'd stepped out of another world. "Miss Hayes," he greeted with a nod. "I'm Darius Powell, Mr. Thorne's assistant." He handed her an envelope with an address and thick bundle of money inside. "He agrees to a meeting today at 3 p.m. A car will pick you up. This is an advance. It covers your mother's immediate treatment. The rest comes after the marriage is legal." Aisha stared at the money, more bills than she'd ever counted in her entire life. Behind her, her father whispered, "Aisha, maybe we can find another way." She closed her eyes. "No, we've run out of ways. I'll go. I'll look him in the eye, then I'll decide." At 3 sharp, a black luxury car pulled up outside their apartment. Aisha wore her best dress, a simple burgundy outfit she'd saved for an interview that never happened. Her hair was tied neatly, her face calm. She didn't let her hands tremble as she climbed into the backseat. The drive took them out of the inner-city chaos. Slowly, traffic gave way to winding roads and tall trees. Soon, enormous wrought iron gates opened, revealing the Thorne estate, and Aisha's breath caught in her throat. It looked like a palace. A mansion with marble pillars, trimmed hedges, Greek fountains, and windows that seemed to judge you just for looking underdressed. Darius greeted her at the entrance with a stiff smile. "Mr. Thorne is expecting you in the library." Wordlessly, she followed him through grand halls that felt like something out of a European museum, chandeliers, oil paintings, marble everything. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant ticking of an unseen clock. Finally, Darius opened a set of heavy oak doors and stepped aside. Aisha hesitated, then stepped into the library. The room was larger than her entire apartment, shelves lined from floor to ceiling with books. In front of a massive window sat a high-backed leather chair. A man was seated in it, facing away from her. "Mr. Thorne, your guest," Darius announced, then exited, closing the doors behind him. A heavy silence fell. The figure hadn't turned around. Aisha spoke first, her voice tight. "Hello." "Come closer," said a deep, slow voice. "I want to see you." She approached with cautious steps, and the man finally turned his chair, and Aisha froze. In front of her sat a man with a half-mask covering the upper part of his face, silver, ornate, and unnerving. His visible eye was sharp, intelligent, his gray-stubbled chin firm despite age. The left arm lay limp at his side, the right gripped a silver-handled cane. "So you're Elias Thorne," she said. Her voice tried to stay calm. "And you are braver than I expected," he replied. "Most would have run by now." "What is this?" she asked, gesturing to the mask. "Why hide your face?" "Because I am not whole," he said matter-of-factly. "The stroke damaged half my body and half my face. The mask keeps pity away, mostly." He leaned forward. "Would you prefer I take it off?" "No," she said too quickly. He chuckled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. A moment passed. "I imagine you have questions," he said. Aisha's fists tightened. "Why me?" "There are younger girls, models, gold diggers. You could hire someone to pretend to love you, so why me?" He was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because you're not pretending," he said. "You're honest about why you came. You care for your family more than your future. That honesty means everything to me." She blinked, thrown off by his answer. "All my life," he continued, "people have sought me out for power, money, access. Not one person who approached me ever did so without wanting something in return. But you offered your life for your parents. That speaks volumes." "And yet," Aisha snapped, "you saw that sacrifice and tried to buy it. You don't want love or partnership. You want a nurse who'll show up in a white dress." "A wife," he corrected calmly. A lawful wife, one who stays till the end. In return, everything I own becomes yours." A choked silence followed. Elias leaned back. "I don't ask you to love me, Aisha. I just ask that in my final days I don't die alone." She turned toward the enormous window, her heart hammering. Somewhere out there was her real life, her sick mother, her anxious father, the cheap apartment with its drafty windows and broken dreams. And behind her, in this golden cage, was comfort, wealth, and safety. But at what cost? "When would the wedding be?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "1 week," Elias replied softly. "No ceremony, no celebration, only paperwork." She turned toward him again. "I have conditions." Elias raised a brow. "My mother's treatment begins today. My father's debt is wiped now, not after I say I do. And I meet you like this again before we sign anything." He nodded, agreed. "And one more thing," she added. "If I stay, I visit my parents freely. They visit me." "You're not my prisoner," he said gently. "This is your home if you choose it." She studied him for a long moment. He looked sick, broken, but not cruel. And perhaps somewhere behind that mask was a man even more trapped than she was. The black sedan returned the next day, punctual as a funeral procession. Aisha wore the burgundy dress again, the one she wore to her first meeting with Elias Thorne. This time it felt heavier somehow, knowing now what or who came with the price. Before leaving, her mother clutched her hand, tears forming in tired eyes. "You don't have to do this, Aisha," Lena whispered. "We'll figure something out, just stay." But Aisha had already made her peace with the lie. "It's going to be okay," she answered. It was, they both knew it, but sometimes lies were better than truth when the truth hurt too much to hold. The estate looked different under the autumn light, majestic, cold, and far too quiet. Darius Powell met her at the entrance. "Welcome back, Mrs. Hayes." "I'm not Mrs. Thorne yet," she replied. A flicker of something, irritation, perhaps, passed under his composed smile. "Very well, Mr. Thorne is waiting in the library." Inside, Elias sat by the window again, half-masked and stone-still like a statue in mourning. This time, Aisha approached first. "No second thoughts?" he asked without turning. "I'm not here to lie to you," she replied. "I'm still filled with second thoughts, but I came anyway." He smiled. It was tired and almost grateful. They spent the next hour speaking about the wedding. No guests, no rings, only signatures on white paper that would bind them legally and ethically uncomfortably. "When it's over," Aisha said, "I want to stay in a separate room." "Of course," Elias answered. "You may choose any room in the estate except mine." "And my family can visit any time." He paused, then added, "If your mother recovers, she can stay here too. It's a big house. It deserves warmth again." Aisha didn't expect that. For the first time, she glanced around the mansion not with awe, but with empathy. It wasn't a palace, it was a tomb. The next day, the wedding happened. No music. No flowers. No one smiling. Only Elias leaning against his cane in a sharply pressed black suit, and Aisha, pale, composed, wearing a simple white dress that felt more like a sentence than a celebration. They exchanged only names at the clerk's office. No vows, no kiss. Just ink on paper and a handshake more than a touch. It was done. Legal. Bound. Forever, or however long forever lasted for a dying man. When they returned to the estate, Esther, the housekeeper, approached Aisha with a soft knock on the guest room door. "Mr. Thorne said dinner will be in his quarters tonight," she announced. "In his room?" Aisha asked, heart beginning to thrum. "Why?" "It's tradition," Esther answered with a soft, unreadable expression. "A husband and wife must dine together after their wedding." Aisha felt her throat tighten. She wasn't ready for tradition. She hadn't signed up for that part of marriage. Still, at exactly 9 o'clock, she opened the doors to Elia's suite. And froze. It wasn't what she expected. The room was warm, dimly lit, with a gently crackling fireplace and a small table set for two. Candles flickered, silverware shimmered, but there was no tension, no tricks. Elia stood to greet her, still masked. "Please," he said, "no expectations, just dinner." Aisha exhaled slowly and took the seat at the small table, folding her hands in her lap. "Thank you," she said after a moment, "for not pushing." "You're not a prisoner," Elias replied. "You're a person. I may have asked you here for the wrong reasons," he paused, "but forcing affection was never one of them." Aisha wasn't sure how to respond to that. So they ate in silence of sorts. The clatter of gentle forks, the wine swirling, wood splitting in the fire. It felt less like a romantic dinner and more like a buried eulogy for the lives they left behind. After a while, Elias spoke. "Tell me something you don't usually admit to strangers." Aisha was surprised. "Is that an order or a game?" "Neither, just an attempt," he said quietly, "to know the woman who just agreed to leave everything for me." She was silent a while before saying, "I was going to apply to a publishing job, proofreading stories, but life." She gestured vaguely, happened instead. "You love stories," Elias said. "I live them," she replied. He looked at her quietly. "So do I." Later that night, Aisha walked back alone to her room on the third floor, a space Darius had shown her earlier. She had chosen a bedroom in the corner, facing the woods, away from the main drive. Its windows were large, its bed untouched. When she'd entered earlier that day, Darius had paused at the door and mumbled, "Someone used to live here." Then quickly changed the subject. Now Aisha stared at the silken pillows and velvet drapes. Everything was perfect, expensive, luxurious. And deeply, painfully hollow. The golden cage. She buried her face into her hands and let a single tear fall. For herself. For what she gave up. And for the strange ache she felt toward the masked man who didn't ask for her love, only her presence. After the wedding night dinner in Elias Thorne's suite, Aisha slept less and thought more. The mansion no longer felt like a stranger's home, but it didn't feel like hers either. She moved like a guest inside someone else's ghost story. Elias kept his word, polite, distant, never inappropriate. They shared quiet breakfasts, small conversations, and long sessions reading together in the library. And strange as it was to admit, Aisha found herself growing comfortable. Until one morning, there was a knock at her door that changed everything. Darius Powell stood outside as usual, but this time he wasn't alone. A middle-aged man in a tailored navy suit stood next to him, smug, with sharp eyes and a cologne so strong it made Aisha step back. "And you must be the young wife," he said, holding out an uninvited hand. "Nice to meet you, darling. I'm Silas Thorne, the ever-so-forgotten brother." "Brother?" Aisha blinked. "Mr. Thorne never mentioned you were." "Alive," Silas laughed. "We don't talk much, ever since he became rich and I became me." He brushed past her effortlessly and made his way inside. Darius shot Aisha a quick look, unreadable, and followed. In Elias' quarters, voices rose quickly. "What do you want, Silas?" she heard Elias ask, his tone laced with guilt, anger, and something close to shame. "Oh, nothing, just heard you married a woman half your age, thought I'd stop by, offer my brotherly blessing, ask when the will's being rewritten." A pause. "You do plan to change the old will, right? You know, the one where I inherit everything if you drop dead before making edits." Aisha stood frozen at the half-closed door. The old will. She felt like the chandelier above could crash down at any second. "You can leave now," Elias said, voice painfully calm. "Oh, I'm just making sure your new wife knows the rule book." She might be spoon-feeding you and playing Florence Nightingale, but legally, if you die tonight, I win." "You monster," Elias whispered. There was silence. Then footsteps. Silas opened the door and walked out right past Aisha. He smirked. "So, heard it all, did you? Good, better to know the stakes you're playing for, darling." That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. The will hadn't been changed. The inheritance Darius had promised before the wedding had never been legally transferred. And she just heard that Silas, a snake with a slick suit, stood to inherit everything. That meant money, control, even this house. Worse still, if something happened to Elias before he signed the revised documents, there would be nothing left for her family. And then a darker thought crept in. What if someone didn't just plan to wait for Elias to die? What if someone planned to hasten it? The next day, Aisha approached Elias in his study. He was reading in silence, the fireplace casting warm shadows on his half-paralyzed face. He looked up at her, his voice was soft. "You overheard him." "Yes," she replied. "And you're wondering if it's true." She didn't speak. He folded his hands across the cane in front of him. "It is. The will remains in Silas's name. I delayed changing it. I didn't want you to feel like you were tied to me just for financial safety." "But we signed a deal," Aisha said. "That was the condition." "Yes, but I've grown to care about you too much to think of you as a transaction." The words hit harder than they should have, and softer than she expected. Then he added, "The notary returns the day after tomorrow. I was planning to change it. I promise you, you and your parents will be taken care of." Aisha closed her eyes. She believed him. But what if Darius knew this too? And what if he had his own deal with Silas? That afternoon, Aisha found herself alone in the hallway outside the kitchen just as Esther, the housekeeper, overheard a conversation. Darius was on the phone. "I told you the will hasn't changed yet. If we delay a bit longer—" "Yes, I'm watching her. She's protective now. No, he won't live past this month. I'll make it look like an accident." Esther froze. Aisha's heart stopped. They both looked at each other and understood. Silas and Darius were working together. They didn't just plan to inherit the money. They planned to kill Elias before he could change the will. That night, Aisha refused to leave Elias' side. She moved his medications personally. She watched him eat. She checked the railing on the stairs. She kept candles lit, shadows sharp, and doors locked. Darius made several subtle attempts to pull her away. "Mrs. Thorne, there's a call for you upstairs." "Mrs. Thorne, I'd love to show you some documents about your side of the estate." Each time she declined with a flat voice and an unblinking stare. And Darius smiled, almost like he knew she'd figured it out, but he didn't care. Yet, the storm broke the following morning. Aisha brought Elias his tea, as always, and found him in his armchair holding a document. White as a sheet. He held out the paper to her with a trembling hand. It was a bank transfer forged in his name. A massive amount had been stolen. Signed in shaky signature. But Aisha noticed something odd. "That S in your last name, you always loop it like a violin bow." Elias nodded. "This one's just a straight line." "A forgery," she whispered, "and if they're bold enough to steal, they won't hesitate to." She didn't finish. Because just then, the door blew open. Darius Powell entered. With a gun in his hand. When Darius Powell stepped into the room with the gun, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Aisha's instincts kicked in. She stood in front of Elias, shielding him with her body. "I hoped you wouldn't figure it out so soon," Darius said flatly. "Now I'll have to improvise." His voice had no emotion, just quiet resolve, as if murdering someone was just an inconvenient task in a busy schedule. I trusted you, Elias whispered from the armchair, for 20 years. That's the thing, Mr. Thorne, Darius replied, his voice bitter. For 20 years I was invisible, but your brother, he promised me something better, freedom, power, a chunk of your empire. I'd be stupid to say no. You're even more pathetic than I thought, Aisha snarled. Darius raised the gun. I'll let fate decide who falls first. But before he could fire, the door behind him slammed open. Esther, with a fire iron. The metal struck Darius in the back of his head with force only desperation can summon. He dropped instantly, the gun clattered across the marble. Shouts, chaos, sirens soon after. Aisha collapsed to her knees, not from fear but relief. She looked up at Elias, who looked at her like a man meeting his savior. You covered me, he whispered. You protected me. Always, she said softly. You didn't buy me with money, you earned me with your heart. Aftermath. That night changed everything. Darius was arrested. Silas, who had left a digital trail of voice notes and bribes, was also taken into custody. Their conspiracy was exposed through hundreds of messages and recorded calls, many of which Esther had the foresight to capture. The mansion staff, few but loyal, celebrated quietly. Elias stayed in his room for days, silent and ashamed. He had been betrayed by the person he trusted most, but in that betrayal he had also discovered something he never expected. Aisha's loyalty, her sacrifice, her truth. The doctors made a startling discovery. The medication Darius had been giving Elias had been deliberately wrong. Some symptoms were side effects. The decline in Elias' condition wasn't just age or stroke, it was poisoning over time. Withdrawal revealed he still had strength left in him. Rehabilitation began. And Aisha never left his side. 1 month later, on a clear morning that smelled like autumn leaves, they returned to the lake where Elias once dreamed of building a house for the family he lost. Now he sat there, no cane. Aisha beside him. No mask. His scars showing, his limp still present, but something in his eyes had shifted. Hope. I used to come here when I was younger, Elias said, back when I thought building a lake house would save my marriage, my daughter, my soul. I guess you built it anyway, Aisha whispered. He turned to her, not yet, but I will, not for ghosts this time, but for us. Aisha's heart squeezed. Do I still have your permission? He asked, smiling. She laughed, the first real laugh in what felt like forever. Only if I get to design the reading room. The new will and a new promise. That week, Elias finally spoke to his lawyer, but as he started talking about transferring everything to Aisha, she gently stopped him. No conditions, she said, not this time. He looked at her, confused. I don't want inheritance to hang between us like a weight. If you love me, leave me only what I deserve if and when you feel I've earned it. But Elias started. She placed her hand on his heart. You've already given me more than wealth ever could. You gave my mom back her life. With tears in his eyes, Elias rewrote his will. Everything, all of it, was placed in a private trust set aside for Aisha, not as part of a deal. But because she had become the one person who knew everything about him and stayed anyway. Life after. Aisha found herself becoming more than just a bride in a contract. She was now a partner, a friend, a healer, a second chance that neither of them had asked for, yet both desperately needed. Her mother's surgery was a success. Her father found part-time work nearby. They sometimes visited the estate, drinking tea on the grand patio, laughing like life hadn't crushed them not too long ago. Elias improved daily. He read again, he painted, he told stories. But more than anything, he lived. Because of her. One day, standing near the water as builders broke ground for the new home, Elias took her hand and said, You were supposed to be my caregiver, my final companion. And look what happened, she smiled. You became my reason to live again. For a moment, neither spoke. The lake rippled quietly, reflecting the sky like silver glass. Then Elias said, "Once I wore a mask to hide my brokenness. And now." He turned to her, eyes gleaming with something stronger than promises, peace. "Now I wear nothing but love."